Thanks for subscribing. Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of absolute precision.
Right, like it's an engineering problem or something.
Exactly. It feels totally binary. Like if you fall and break your arm, the x-ray shows that, that jagged white line right through the bone.
Yeah, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is. There is the problem.
Right. The structural failure is right there, and the way to fix it is completely standardized. But then you step out of the orthopedic ward and you get into the realm of the mind-body connection, and, well, suddenly that pristine x-ray machine is just useless.
Oh, completely useless. The landscape gets incredibly murky.
Yeah, the lines between, like, a physical ailment and an emotional wound aren't just blurred, they're constantly overlapping. And today, we are immersing ourselves in exactly that kind of complex territory.
We really are. We're looking at some heavy, transformative stuff today.
Yeah, we're doing a deep dive into the teachings of Louise Hay, relying specifically on her really influential book, The Power is Within You.
Which is, it's basically a cornerstone for modern self-help.
Totally.
Even though it often gets, mischaracterized or maybe oversimplified in pop culture.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I want to speak directly to you, the listener, for a second. If you are a curious person who is constantly absorbing information and listening to deep dives like this, you probably feel buried sometimes.
Oh, the sheer volume of self-improvement advice out there is staggering.
It's too much. Every day there's a new protocol, a new hack, some new philosophy claiming to be the absolute answer to all human suffering.
Right. The definitive cure-all.
Exactly. So our mission here is to cut through that noise. We're going to dismantle the actual mechanics of how our internal dialogue shapes our external reality, at least according to these sources.
And we really want to look at the practical ways to access what Hay calls the inner power to heal.
Right. But, to truly grasp the weight of these concepts, we can't really separate the philosophy from the philosopher, can we?
No, absolutely not. Her personal narrative is, well, it's the foundation of the whole text.
The crucible where all this was forged.
Exactly. Because if you just read her affirmations totally out of context, they might sound like, I don't know, just polite platitudes.
Like bumper sticker slogans.
Yeah. But when you understand the environment she came from, the teachings just take on a much heavier, much more profound significance.
So let's talk about that environment.
Yeah.
Because the text details a childhood that was, frankly, harrowing.
It was devastating. She was born into extreme poverty and endured severe systemic abuse throughout her early years.
A completely brutal starting line. And yet the trajectory of her life takes this wild, almost cinematic upward swing later on.
Yeah, she eventually escapes. She makes it to New York City and enters the fashion world.
Becomes a high fashion model, right?
Right. She basically constructs an entirely new reality for herself. She builds this glamorous life, marries a wealthy businessman, and, from the outside, it looks like she has totally severed ties with that trauma.
Like she achieved the ultimate American dream of reinvention.
Exactly. But then, after 14 years, that marriage suddenly and just painfully ends.
And that collapse, the collapse of that safe external structure she built, that's what inadvertently acts as the catalyst for the work she eventually shares with millions.
Right. Following the divorce, she finds her way to the Church of Religious Science, which was founded by Ernest Holmes.
And she really dives in, doesn't she?
Oh, she completely absorbs it. Their core teachings heavily emphasize the direct connection between the activity of the human mind and the physical experience of the body.
And she doesn't just attend meetings. She becomes a highly sought-after speaker and eventually a counselor.
Yeah, and during that time, she starts observing these patterns in her clients. She starts literally mapping specific physical ailments to their potential emotional root causes.
Which becomes her famous reference guide.
Yeah.
But the defining moment of her life, the real stress test of everything she had been teaching, arrives when she becomes a patient.
Right. She receives a devastating diagnosis, cervical cancer.
And her reaction to this is just wild. Most people would view that as a random, terrifying biological failing, like a roll of the genetic dice.
Or an external attack on the body. But Hay views it entirely through the hyper-specific lens of her own teachings.
She turns inward.
She turns inward and comes to this staggering conclusion. She determines that her cancer is not random at all.
Wait, she believed it was a physical manifestation of her emotions.
Exactly. She believed it was the literal physical manifestation of decades of deep-seated, unresolved resentment stemming directly from her childhood abuse.
Okay, let's just pause and hold that up to the light. because we need to be very clear about the magnitude of what she's claiming here.
It is a massive claim.
It really is. The central thesis we are exploring today is her assertion that we all possess an infinite mind, like a connection to a higher self, and that radical self-love is the absolute key to fixing our lives.
And she literally believed that her intense lack of self-love, combined with all that stored resentment, actually generated the cancer cells in her body.
Her framework suggests the body is basically a mirror, right? Reflecting the landscape of the mind.
That's the perfect way to put it. And she believed that if the mind created the disease by operating in a state of resentment, then by accessing that infinite mind and choosing radical forgiveness, she could reverse it.
And the text asserts that she did, that she successfully cured her own cancer by confronting that emotional baggage.
Yes, that is the claim.
Now, we have to acknowledge that telling someone their thoughts caused their cancer is, well, it's an incredibly provocative claim.
Extremely. Especially to a modern ear grounded in traditional medicine.
Yeah, it borders on victim blaming. Like, oh, you got sick, you just didn't love yourself enough.
Right, but before we just dismiss it entirely or embrace it, we really have to understand the operating system she believes we're all running on.
The mechanics of it all. How does the mind actually function according to the powers within you?
Well, to avoid that victim-blaming trap, we have to look at her foundational concept, the infinite mind.
Higher self.
Exactly. She posits that we aren't just isolated biological machines stumbling around, we are intimately connected to a universal intelligence.
And she characterizes this intelligence as pure love, freedom, and understanding, right?
Yes, that's the expansive spiritual side of it, but then she brings it down to a very granular mechanical level with what she calls the law of the mind.
Okay, let's get into the law of the mind. This is about the subconscious, right?
Right. The subconscious or semi-conscious mind. And the most terrifying aspect of this law is that the subconscious mind is entirely, completely non-judgmental.
Meaning it doesn't filter anything.
Zero capacity for critical analysis. The conscious mind can debate and rationalize, but the subconscious just accepts whatever core beliefs we feed it.
Wow. So it doesn't step in and say, hey, that's a terrible belief, let's not act on that.
Nope. It simply takes the repetitive thoughts, accepts them as fact, and tirelessly shapes our physical reality and behaviors to match those exact beliefs.
You know, I think we need a modern framework to visualize this. Because if we look at it through the lens of neuroscience, it sounds a lot like the reticular activating system, the RAS.
Oh, that's a great psychological bridge.
Yeah, because the RAS is that bundle of nerves at the brainstem that filters information. But it doesn't decide what's important based on what's actually good for you. It decides based on what you focus on the most.
Exactly. If you focus constantly on threats, your RAS ensures you notice every single potential danger in your environment.
Validating your belief that the world is terrifying.
Right.
Let's take it even simpler, like a computer operating system or, a completely neutral tape recorder.
A tape recorder has no moral compass.
None at all. If you
Yeah.
sing a beautiful symphony into it, it records and plays it back perfectly. If you scream vicious insults into the microphone, it plays that back with the exact same fidelity.
It doesn't care if the code you type is a helpful app or a malicious virus.
It's just an execution engine. It receives the input and manufactures the output.
The tape recorder just spins. And Hay is arguing that most of us are completely unaware of the audio we are feeding into the microphone on a loop all day long.
But wait, this brings up a massive logical question. If the subconscious is just a neutral engine, why on earth would anyone deliberately type a virus into their own system?
Well, no one consciously wakes up and thinks, I'd like to ruin my own life today.
Exactly.
The virus isn't usually installed maliciously by the user. It's installed accidentally, usually through a fundamental misunderstanding of responsibility.
A misunderstanding of responsibility. Walk down that path a bit further. How do we mix that up?
We feed the tape recorder phrases of deep self-limitation because we conflate taking responsibility with assigning blame.
Ah, okay.
When a negative event happens, human nature makes us look for a cause. We want to know whose fault it is so the world makes sense.
Right, and sometimes we blame external factors to strip ourselves of agency.
Yes, but very often, especially if we carry childhood wounds, we blame ourselves. We internalize the failure.
Like a project at work goes badly, and instead of saying, that project failed, we tell the tape recorder, I am a failure.
Or, I am unlovable. I am not good enough. Hay argues that true responsibility has absolutely nothing to do with blame, guilt, or self-flagellation.
It's literally just responsibility, the ability to respond.
Exactly. The power to choose your reaction.
So when we use the language of blame, especially self-blame, we aren't fixing anything. We're just unwittingly giving the tape recorder a terrible set of instructions.
We are giving it the architectural blueprint for our future misery. If you walk around habitually thinking, I'm not good enough, the subconscious lacks any critical filter. It just says, understood, we are not good enough.
I will now align all external circumstances to validate this law.
Precisely. It will subtly steer you away from a great career opportunity because you don't deserve it. It'll prompt you to sabotage healthy relationships.
And even, in Hay's view, compromise your immune system to reflect that internal decay.
It is a self-fulfilling prophecy orchestrated by your own OS.
Which is incredibly daunting. It implies we are the architects of our own suffering. But, flipping that over, it's also weirdly empowering.
Because if you wrote the malicious code, you inherently possess the administrative access to rewrite it.
Right. The core optimism of the text. And this transitions beautifully into her specific views on the illusion of the past.
Which is a very tough pill to swallow for anyone carrying significant trauma. She leans heavily on the idea that we are not victims of our past.
And we really feel the weight of history, don't we?
We feel like the past is a physical burden strapped to our backs, dictating our posture. But Hay insists that past thoughts and events only exist as active forces if we actively choose to keep thinking them right now.
So the event happened in reality, yes. But the emotional resonance, the limiting belief, only survives if you continuously breathe life into it today.
Exactly. The memory is a file on the hard drive, but you are the one choosing to open the file and run the program every single morning.
She states that the point of power is always, exclusively, now.
The present moment is the only place you have access to the record button. You can't record over yesterday's tape.
And tomorrow's tape hasn't been loaded yet.
Right. And to bring this back to the broader implications, the text observes that people who genuinely love themselves naturally develop what Hay describes as a protective shield.
Against bad luck or negative circumstances.
Yeah. The shield concept is fascinating because it's not magical thinking. It's not that bad things stop happening. It's an energetic and psychological resilience.
So when they face adversity, it doesn't penetrate their core identity.
Exactly. A failure at work is just a failure at work. It doesn't become proof that they are a worthless human being.
Because their subconscious is fundamentally programmed for harmony. So when an obstacle appears, the OS automatically searches for a solution instead of using it as evidence to validate a negative self-belief.
It's the difference between saying, I made a mistake and I am a mistake. The shield protects the I am.
That makes perfect sense. So if the theory is this elegant, just program the tape recorder with love, focus on the present, maintain the shield, why is it so incredibly difficult in practice?
Well, that brings us to the blockades.
Right. If our minds possess this level of reality-shaping power, why are so many of us chronically stressed, sick, and unhappy? We need to identify the actual viruses corrupting the system.
Hay categorizes these deeply ingrained emotional viruses as the four giants.
The four giants. Okay, let's dissect them.
These are the massive systemic emotional patterns that hijack our resources and keep us imprisoned in negative loops. They are criticism, guilt, fear, and resentment.
We have to understand how they operate to uninstall them. Let's start with the first giant, criticism.
In her framework, criticism isn't about healthy discernment. It's not about evaluating a piece of art. It is the relentless, compulsive habit of finding fault.
A hyper-focus on the negative aspects of ourselves primarily.
Yes, and it inevitably bleeds outward into how we view others. And the tragic part is we are rarely born with this critical lens.
Right. Like a toddler doesn't look in the mirror and criticize their thigh gap.
Exactly. We acquire this giant by mirroring our environment. We usually internalize the voices of hypercritical parents, caregivers, or societal figures.
So if you grow up in a house where the standard is perfection, your subconscious records that unattainable standard as the baseline for safety.
You essentially download the critical parent into your own mind. Decades later, the parent doesn't even need to be in the room.
You drop a project at work, and you instinctively berate yourself with the exact same vocabulary your parent used when you spilled milk at age 5.
You become your own worst enemy. And the giant of criticism just runs constantly in the background, consuming all your mental energy.
Which naturally feeds right into the second giant, guilt.
Guilt is so pervasive.
Let's talk about guilt, because it's not just feeling bad about a specific action here. It's described as this heavy, chronic sensation that we are fundamentally flawed.
It's an existential heaviness. And what makes guilt so insidious, according to the text, is the mechanical way the subconscious responds to it. Guilt, by its very nature, demands punishment.
I really want to unpack the psychology of that. Why does the human brain actively seek out punishment if we feel guilty?
It goes back to the subconscious trying to maintain a logical narrative. It's a rule-following machine. If the core belief installed is, I am guilty, the machine looks at the rules of the universe and says, what happens to guilty people?
Guilty people receive punishment.
Exactly. Therefore, to validate our core belief, we must experience punishment.
So the subconscious actively orchestrates scenarios where we suffer just to prove its own programming correct.
Yes. It creates a brutal confirmation bias. Hay suggests this can even manifest as physical accidents or seemingly random strings of bad luck.
Like you trip and twist your ankle right before a marathon you train for?
Or you inexplicably lose your wallet, get into a fender bender. The conscious mind says, wow, I'm having a terrible week of bad luck. But the subconscious mind checks its ledger and says, sentence served. The books are balanced.
That is genuinely terrifying. It is a self-correcting justice system gone entirely rogue inside our own heads.
It really is.
We punish ourselves to alleviate the cognitive dissonance of feeling guilty without consequence. Okay, moving to the third giant. Fear.
Fear is framed here not just as an acute response to, like, a tiger in the bushes. It's a chronic, systemic lack of trust in the universe.
So when we operate under the giant of fear, we're disconnected from that infinite mind.
Completely disconnected. And because we lack that unseen spiritual trust, our ego tries to compensate by controlling the physical environment.
We become chronic micromanagers of reality.
Yes, you obsess over details, try to manipulate other people's behaviors, force outcomes, all because you believe if you let go of the steering wheel for 1 second, the car goes off a cliff.
And trying to control the universe is not only impossible, it is completely exhausting. It drains your battery.
Furthermore, it cuts you off from intuition or flow. You cannot notice serendipitous opportunities if your knuckles are white and you are vibrating with panic. You narrow your field of vision only to threats.
Which brings us to the fourth, and arguably the most formidable giant. The text is unambiguous about this.
Yes, resentment, or deeply buried anger. It is the most physically dangerous blockade we face.
Resentment is the silent killer in her philosophy, right?
Absolutely. This is anger that has not been processed or expressed. It is swallowed, compressed, and allowed to fester. The core premise here is that emotions are energy, and energy cannot just be destroyed.
So if you bury intense emotional energy, it has to go somewhere.
Hay argues that it takes up residence in the physical tissues of the body.
And this circles us all the way back to her harrowing personal narrative. She receives the diagnosis of cervical cancer, and instead of looking outward, she identifies a massive lifelong deposit of buried rage.
Resentment from her childhood abuse. She viewed the cancer as the final, desperate, physical manifestation of that unhealed wound.
Like her body was screaming the pain that her conscious mind had tried to ignore.
Consequently, her treatment plan was totally unorthodox. She embarked on a highly intensive 6-month physical and mental detox regimen.
The text details the physical stuff shifting to a strict vegetarian diet, reflexology, enemas to clear the digestive tract. A complete physical overhaul. But the crux of her treatment, the thing she believed actually turned the tide, was the mental clearing.
The physical detox was merely the tangible reflection of the emotional detox. She believed she had to undergo a process of total, uncompromising forgiveness.
She had to identify everyone she resented and systematically dissolve that anger.
Because she believed that if she surgically removed the tumor but left the resentment intact, the tape recorder would simply manufacture a new tumor. The underlying code hadn't changed.
You know, the analogy that comes to mind for these four giants is so clear for the modern era. Think of them like malicious apps silently running in the background of your smartphone.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
We all know that frustration.
Huh?
Your phone is burning hot in your pocket, the battery is plummeting by 10% every few minutes, everything is lagging, and you haven't even opened the screen.
It's completely debilitating to the device.
Exactly. Because these background apps, the constant hum of criticism, the heavy processing power of guilt, the frantic scanning of fear, and the massive data storage of resentment, they are just churning away.
Consuming all your system resources.
In human terms, they are draining your immune system, your cognitive bandwidth, your life force, and they will continue until the system experiences a total crash.
They leave you with zero battery life to allocate toward healing, creativity, or joy.
Now, I have to step in and push back here,
Hmm.
specifically on the giant of resentment, because it's very easy for us to sit here in a studio and speak abstractly about letting go of anger. But what if someone actually deeply wronged you? We are talking about Louise Hay, who suffered horrific, undeniable abuse as a child. How can we categorize resentment as a giant we have to slay if the anger is entirely objectively justified?
It's a really tough question.
If someone harms you intentionally, isn't anger the correct, healthy, protective response?
You are hitting on the most challenging friction point in her entire philosophy. The instinct to hold on to justified anger is powerful. But Hay's analysis draws a very hard, pragmatic line on the concept of justification.
Okay, what is that line?
From her perspective, the universe and your subconscious tape recorder does not have a justice department.
Wow. It doesn't have a Justice Department.
No, it does not evaluate the moral validity of your anger. It simply doesn't matter if you have a perfectly logical, legally sound, widely agreed upon justification for your resentment.
But why does the justification not matter? If someone breaks a contract or harms a child, the justification is the reality of the situation.
Because the subconscious only cares about the biochemical and energetic state you are maintaining in your body. Holding on to resentment, no matter how justified, is like holding a live electrical wire and hoping the person who wronged you gets electrocuted.
But you are the only one taking the voltage.
Exactly. Your immune system doesn't know that the person who hurt you deserves to be punished. It only knows your body is constantly flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. Hay's view is that maintaining any of the four giants is ultimately a choice you make about your own internal environment.
But, I mean, doesn't releasing the anger imply that what the person did was acceptable? That feels like a betrayal of the self.
This is where we have to totally redefine forgiveness. Letting go of the resentment is not synonymous with condoning the behavior.
It's not saying what you did was okay.
Not at all. It's saying what you did was abhorrent, but I refuse to allow your past actions to continue destroying my physical body and dictating my future happiness.
Oh, wow. So it's about recognizing that the anger is no longer a protective mechanism. It's mutated into a self-destruct sequence.
Exactly. Forgiveness, in this framework, is actually an act of radical self-interest.
It is force quitting the malicious background app so you get your battery life back.
Precisely. As long as you maintain the resentment, you are energetically tethered to the person who harmed you. You're allowing them to live rent-free in your nervous system.
Forgiveness is serving them an eviction notice. It's clearing the cache.
Yes.
All right, let's assume you, the listener, are with us so far. You recognize that criticism, guilt, fear, and resentment are draining your battery, and you want to serve that eviction notice.
Yeah.
You want to rewrite the code. How do we move from theory to practical application?
Well, this transitions us into the toolkit she provides for overwriting the tape. And the primary instrument she advocates for is the use of affirmations.
Affirmations, the literal lines of new code you are attempting to type into the operating system.
But there is a massive caveat here. This isn't just about repeating positive words like a parrot.
You can't just slap a happy bumper sticker on a car with a blown engine.
Right. Hay emphasizes the absolute necessity of a concept called deservingness.
The core belief that you actually deserve the positive outcome.
Yes. If you do not fundamentally believe you are worthy of health, love, or prosperity, your subconscious will simply reject the affirmation outright.
It treats it like a syntax error.
Exactly. Imagine typing "I am wealthy" into the system. The subconscious scans the core belief database, finds a deeply entrenched file labeled "I am unworthy and money is evil," and immediately rejects the new code to maintain system stability.
So the underlying foundation of self-worth has to be addressed for the words to even stick.
Yes. Assuming we are working on that baseline, there are specific structural rules for how to write the code correctly. The text is very particular about phrasing.
And the most critical rule, which aligns heavily with cognitive behavioral therapy, is that affirmations must be stated in the present tense.
The language is "I am," not "I will be."
That distinction feels vital.
It is. If you constantly say, "I will be healthy," or "I am going to get that promotion," the subconscious, which operates entirely in the present moment, registers that command and says, "Understood. Health and success are always in the future."
They belong to tomorrow. And tomorrow, by definition, never arrives.
You're programming a state of perpetual waiting. You must state the affirmation as a present reality. "I am healthy. I am fully capable. I am at peace."
You are commanding the subconscious to bridge the gap between your current reality and the statement. But Let's look at the reality of practicing this. The phenomenon of pushback is something everyone experiences.
Oh, definitely.
The text explicitly notes that the second you begin using positive affirmations, negative thoughts will instantly flood your mind to argue with you.
It's the immune system of your old programming fighting off the new code. The old beliefs want to survive.
Exactly. And Hay suggests a really interesting tactic here. She says you shouldn't ignore these negative thoughts or try to drown them out. She advises writing them down.
Bringing them into the light, because they are the exact underlying blockages you need to dismantle.
But let me pose a practical challenge. What happens when someone looks down at a body that is currently suffering from a chronic illness or extreme physical pain, and they try to say the affirmation, "I am entirely healthy"?
Right.
Doesn't the logical brain immediately sound the alarm? How do we navigate the internal voice that rolls its eyes and says, "You are lying to yourself"?
That is probably the highest hurdle in affirmation practice, but Hay offers a profound reframing of that specific doubt. Normally, we view that cynical internal voice as the enemy,
We get frustrated for not being positive enough, and we aggressively suppress the doubt.
which, ironically, is just utilizing the giant of criticism against ourselves. We criticize ourselves for having doubt, reinforcing the negative loop.
It's a total trap, so what does she propose instead?
Instead of treating it as a hostile invader, treat it as a loyal, albeit misguided, friend who is bringing you valuable data.
Misguided, Fred.
That doubting voice is simply reading back the old programming you installed years ago. It thinks it's protecting you from disappointment by reminding you of your reality.
So how do you manage that voice without fighting it?
You acknowledge its presence. You literally engage with the doubt and say, "Thank you for sharing that. I hear you. I know you are trying to protect me, but I don't need this old message anymore. We are doing things differently now. My new reality is X."
You treat it with firm kindness.
Yes, you don't engage in a debate, because debating validates the doubt. You simply dismiss it like you would politely dismiss an outdated piece of advice.
Thanks for the input, but I have administrative privileges now, and we are updating the system. I love that framing.
It's incredibly practical.
Now, affirmations are the verbal code. But the ultimate stress test of whether we truly believe the code, whether we actually possess that core deservingness, happens when we deliver those lines to the most intimidating audience on the planet,
Which is, of course, ourselves.
ourselves. And this brings us to the deepest, most visceral part of her toolkit: mirror work and radical self-love.
This is the juncture where the philosophy moves from intellectual theory into an intense somatic emotional experience.
Mirror work is arguably her most famous contribution, and simultaneously the practice people resist the most.
Without a doubt.
The text outlines the mechanics, and on paper it sounds almost embarrassingly simple. You stand in front of a mirror, make direct eye contact with your own reflection, and speak directly to yourself, saying things like, "I love you. What can I do for you today? How can I support you?"
It sounds like a superficial self-help trope until you actually attempt to do it.
Why is it so excruciatingly difficult? Why does looking at our own reflection and speaking a kind word cause such profound discomfort?
Because the mirror eliminates all avenues of escape. When you are looking deeply into your own eyes, you cannot hide behind your resume, your sharp wit, your bank account, or your busy schedule.
All the external markers of success fall away.
Exactly. The mirror exposes the raw truth of your relationship with yourself. And for most people, that relationship is defined by deep-seated self-loathing.
The mirror brings every internal judge right to the surface. It amplifies the voices of hypercritical parents, societal beauty standards, past partners who diminished you.
It is essentially a form of psychological exposure therapy. You are forcing yourself to maintain eye contact with the person you have been criticizing your entire life.
Think about it. I'll ask you, the listener, to reflect on this directly. Think about the last time you stood in front of a mirror. Were you actually looking at you, the human being?
Or were you simply using the mirror as a tool for inventorying defects?
Right. Were you just checking to see if your hair was out of place,
Mm-hmm.
criticizing the shape of your body, zeroing in on a wrinkle or a blemish?
We have been conditioned to use mirrors almost exclusively as instruments of self-correction. We evaluate the physical shell to ensure it's acceptable to the outside world.
And Hay is demanding that we repurpose the mirror into an altar of unconditional self-acceptance.
And the psychological weight of making that shift is immense. When you stand there and attempt to say, "I love you," the pushback is rarely just a quiet doubt. It is often a violent physical and emotional rejection.
People break down in tears. They experience intense anger, or they just feel a crushing sense of absurdity and want to walk away.
But Hay argues that pushing through that specific acute resistance is where the actual neuroplasticity occurs. That is where the healing happens.
The text also expands the utility of the mirror beyond self-love, applying it as a tool for that radical forgiveness we discussed earlier.
Yes, it becomes a really powerful stage for visualization. If you are locked in battle with the fourth giant, resentment, and someone has deeply wronged you, you can use the mirror.
You visualize them standing in the mirror with you.
And you use that space to have the confrontation that you perhaps cannot, or for safety reasons should not, have in the physical world.
You uncork the bottled emotions.
You articulate the pain. You express the anger, the betrayal, the grief. You let the energy move through your physical body.
But the crucial step, the mechanism that actually severs the energetic tie, is how you conclude the exercise.
You must eventually reach the point where you can look into their visualized eyes in the mirror and state, I release you, you are free, and I am free.
You are formally serving the eviction notice, and the ripple effects of this internal shifting aren't confined to the individual. They bleed out into the environment.
The text provides a remarkable anecdote about a family dynamic completely transformed by this practice.
It perfectly illustrates the systemic nature of her philosophy. Hay recounts the story of a highly dysfunctional family, characterized by constant conflict, arguing, and toxicity.
And one member of this family decided, unilaterally, to engage with mirror work and self-love. Just one person.
And as part of their personal practice, they began silently blessing the other members of the family. They didn't preach or attempt to forcefully change anyone's behavior.
They simply focused on altering their own internal frequency, elevating their baseline to love and acceptance, and silently radiating that energy outward.
And according to Hay's account, the entire ecosystem of the family transformed. By changing their own energetic input, they forced the entire system to recalibrate.
Because they stopped engaging in the familiar dance of conflict. They stopped adding their own static to the family radio station, and eventually the whole broadcast cleared up.
That's incredible. But let's go back to the mirror for a moment. When we stand there and we experience that profound resistance, or we break down crying while trying to say, I love you, we are usually not crying for the capable adult we are today.
No, the resistance is rarely coming from the adult conscious mind. The adult knows they deserve love.
Right.
The entity pushing back from the other side of the mirror is the wounded child we left behind in the past.
And addressing that pain requires a form of psychological time travel. We must venture back to the origin of the corrupted code to heal them. This brings us to the profound work of healing the inner child.
The concept of the inner child isn't unique to Hay, but it is deeply central to her therapeutic approach. Her premise is that every single human being, regardless of their chronological age or their level of outward success.
Whether they're a 25-year-old student or an 85-year-old CEO.
Exactly. Every person houses a frightened, highly vulnerable child inside their psyche, and that child is desperately seeking the comfort, safety, and validation they were denied during their actual childhood.
And more often than not, it's that frightened child who grabs the steering wheel when we exhibit defensive behaviors, when we self-sabotage, or when we react disproportionately to a minor slight.
Because the inner child does not understand time. The child is still reacting to the original wound.
Like the logical adult mind might assess a situation, say, a manager giving constructive feedback at work, and recognize it as safe and professional.
But the inner child hears the tone of the feedback, associates it with a hypercritical parent, and begins screaming, "Danger! We are under attack!"
To soothe this, the text suggests a very specific visualization exercise.
Yeah.
It involves closing your eyes, vividly picturing that younger version of yourself, taking them by the hand and communicating with them.
Asking them directly what they are terrified of, and providing the absolute assurance that you, the empowered adult, are present to protect them now.
You are tasked with becoming the fiercely loving, unconditionally supportive parent to yourself that you perhaps never had.
You must retroactively provide the psychological safety that was absent during your formative years.
Which inevitably brings us to what is, without question, the most difficult pill to swallow in Hay's entire paradigm.
The absolute necessity of forgiving our parents.
It is the ultimate roadblock for many people engaging with this work. How does she justify this requirement, especially for people whose parents failed them profoundly?
Well, her argument relies on a deep, almost radical well of empathy. She asks us to recognize that our parents were not omnipotent gods who chose to be flawed.
They were victims of their own unhealed childhoods.
They were running on a corrupted operating system inherited from their own parents. They could only teach what they consciously knew.
So if they had zero concept of how to love themselves, it was mechanically impossible for them to teach you how to love yourself.
It is a profound acknowledgement of generational trauma, articulated long before that term became a mainstream buzzword. She frames their failures not as malicious intent, but as tragic limitations.
They passed the virus down because they didn't know they were infected.
Exactly. And the text offers a beautiful symbolic visualization to assist in processing this specific heavy resentment.
It involves imagining a fast-flowing, crystal-clear stream. You mentally gather up all the past hurts, the bitter memories, the specific grudges you hold against your parents, and you consciously throw them into the water.
You watch them be carried away, dissolving in the current until they disappear. It is an act of psychological unburdening. You are untying the heavy stones from the back of your inner child.
But I need to challenge this again, forcefully, because the audience is undoubtedly thinking it.
Sure, go ahead.
It is one thing to forgive a parent who is emotionally distant or who worked too much. But what about parents who are actively, dangerously, intentionally abusive?
Right.
Does forgiving an abuser equate to letting them off the hook? How do we reconcile the very real societal need for accountability with this spiritual mandate for absolute forgiveness?
It's the most vital distinction we can make in this entire conversation. Hay's stance is resolute. Forgiveness, in the context of your own spiritual and psychological healing, has absolutely zero to do with the perpetrator's legal, moral, or societal absolution.
So forgiving an abusive parent does not mean they shouldn't face legal consequences for their actions.
It certainly does not mean you are required to allow them back into your life so they can harm you again. Boundaries and forgiveness are not mutually exclusive. In fact, healthy boundaries require the clarity that comes from forgiveness.
So what's the actual mechanism of forgiveness in this extreme context?
It is an internal, energetic severing of chains. It is about reclaiming your own biology and your own future, completely independent of their guilt or innocence.
Okay, to understand the stakes, we have to look at a concept Hay refers to as the totality of possibilities.
Right, which is a concept that mirrors ideas in quantum physics or the unified field theory.
The idea that in the present moment, an infinite number of potential realities and outcomes exist simultaneously.
Exactly. The universe is a field of infinite potential. However, if we remain trapped in the anger of the past, if we stay energetically shackled to our abusers through the heavy chain of resentment, our consciousness is locked into a closed historical loop.
We literally cut ourselves off from the totality of possibilities available in the present.
We cannot perceive new opportunities for joy or connection because our frequency is tuned entirely to past trauma. True forgiveness is taking a pair of bolt cutters to that chain.
You detach your ship from their sinking anchor so you can sail into the open water of the present.
Yes.
So again, we arrive at the conclusion that this is the ultimate act of self-preservation. You are not granting them forgiveness as a gift to soothe their conscience. You are forgiving them because you violently refuse to allow them to steal your future, in addition to your past.
You are extracting your power from the wreckage of the past and consolidating it entirely in the present moment where you can actually use it.
Okay, we have spent a vast amount of time navigating the internal landscape. We've discussed the tape recorder, the mirror, the inner child, the internal severing of chains.
A lot of deep internal work.
Right. And a critic could easily observe all of this and conclude that Louise Hay's philosophy is inherently selfish, just a solitary pursuit. Just me, isolated in my bathroom, staring in the mirror, entirely focused on my own emotional state while the world burns outside.
But Hay insists this interpretation is fundamentally backward. She argues that this intensely personal work is the exact necessary blueprint for saving the planet.
We are moving now from the micro to the macro.
This is where her philosophy scales up in a truly visionary way. She presents a simple, unyielding, logical progression. Global peace is mechanically impossible to achieve without a foundation of inner peace.
It recontextualizes the ancient golden rule: love your neighbor as yourself.
Precisely. For millennia, humanity has focused entirely on the love your neighbor half of the equation, while completely ignoring the prerequisite condition.
The command inherently requires that you love yourself first.
The quality of your love for your neighbor is entirely dependent on the quality of your love for yourself. If you secretly despise yourself, if you are plagued by guilt and criticism, your attempts to love your neighbor will be distorted, conditional, and ultimately destructive.
Hay's macro logic is undeniable. A society composed of millions of self-loathing, fearful, resentful individuals will inevitably, organically construct a sick, violent, war-torn planet.
The macro-level crises we face are just a scaled-up reflection of the micro-level internal wars we are fighting. Our external atrocities, systemic prejudice, violence, environmental degradation, are simply the outward manifestations of the four giants operating unchecked.
The text highlights an incredibly potent historical moment to illustrate the power of communal, healed energy. Hay recounts an experience of being a guest on Oprah Winfrey's television show.
And the context here is vital. This took place during the absolute height of the AIDS epidemic.
A period characterized by immense, paralyzing societal fear, profound stigma, and a tragic lack of medical understanding.
The cultural energy surrounding the disease at that time was one of pure panic, ostracization, and isolation. People were terrified to even touch individuals suffering from the illness.
Yes, and Hay is on this massive national platform, sitting beside a man who is suffering from AIDS. And instead of engaging in a clinical discussion about medical pathology or a political debate about funding, she does something entirely radical.
She turns to the live studio audience and asks them to consciously, intentionally open their hearts to this man.
She asks a room full of fearful people to project unconditional love and acceptance toward him.
She was attempting a real-time, collective, energetic shift. She was asking them to elevate the frequency of the room from the baseline of fear to the frequency of love.
And the text asserts that this act of projecting love and acceptance proved to be a palpable communal healing force. The goal in that specific moment wasn't necessarily to spontaneously cure his biological disease on live television. The goal was to instantly heal the toxic, isolating, energetic environment that the fear had created around him.
It demonstrated that compassion alters the atmosphere, and she provides a tangible framework for anyone to participate in this kind of macro healing known as the Lazarus exercise.
Let's delve into the mechanics of that. What does the Lazarus exercise entail?
It is a structured, guided meditation designed for global impact. Instead of just vaguely wishing for world peace, which the brain struggles to conceptualize, you get specific.
You close your eyes and vividly imagine a specific region of the earth.
Perhaps a nation currently experiencing armed conflict, severe famine, or a devastating natural disaster. You engage your senses. You visualize the people in that region being physically healed. You see them with access to abundant food. You imagine them living in a state of profound peace and safety.
And you consciously generate the feeling of love within your own body and visualize sending out waves of that energy to that specific geographic location.
It perfectly encapsulates the classic airline safety instruction. We have all heard it 1,000 times.
In the event of a loss of cabin pressure, secure your own oxygen mask first before assisting others.
The idea that you can heal a war-torn world by standing in your bathroom, staring into a mirror, and saying, "I love you," sounds utterly counterintuitive to the activist mind. It sounds like a retreat from the world's problems.
But it is, in fact, the ultimate application of the oxygen mask principle.
If you are suffocating on the toxic fumes of your own self-hatred, your own unhealed trauma, and your own resentment, you are functionally useless to the world.
You cannot pull someone else out of the quicksand if you are drowning in it yourself. You are simply adding to the aggregate carbon dioxide in the room.
By committing to the mirror work, by systematically clearing the viruses from your subconscious tape recorder, you are securing your own oxygen mask. You are oxygenating your own spirit.
And the beautiful consequence is that once you are breathing clearly, once you are operating from a baseline of genuine self-love and maintain a clear connection to that infinite mind, you don't even necessarily have to try to heal the world.
Your very presence becomes a stabilizing, healing force in whatever environment you enter. By actively ceasing our own internal psychological wars, we inherently stop contributing ammunition to the external ones.
That is the grand synthesis of Louise Hay's entire life's work and philosophy. The undeniable truth that individual energetic integrity is the only foundation upon which a healthy collective consciousness can be built.
It really is a massive, life-altering paradigm shift.
It moves us from a posture of victimhood to a posture of supreme architectural control. So, let's step back and survey the massive territory we have covered today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We began by acknowledging our fundamental connection to an infinite mind, and we dismantled the mechanics of the law of the mind, realizing that our subconscious is merely a neutral, non-judgmental tape recorder, dutifully manufacturing a reality based on the code we feed it.
We identified the four giants, the deeply ingrained habits of criticism, guilt, fear, and resentment, as the malicious background apps constantly draining our life force and keeping us anchored to the past.
We opened the toolkit. We discussed how to utilize present tense affirmations grounded in a core belief of deservingness to rewrite our internal programming.
And we learned to treat the inevitable voice of doubt not as an enemy to be suppressed, but as a misguided friend offering outdated information.
We confronted the mirror. We explored the radical, incredibly difficult but necessary work of looking directly into our own eyes, stripping away the societal pretense, and repeatedly stating, "I love you," until the subconscious finally accepts the command.
We engaged in psychological time travel to comfort and validate our frightened inner child.
And we tackled the monumental, agonizing task of forgiving those who failed us, specifically our parents, so we could sever the energetic chains of the past and step fully into the totality of possibilities available in the present moment.
And ultimately, we scaled all of this internal work outward, recognizing that dismantling our own blockades is the essential prerequisite for radiating healed, compassionate energy out to a globe that so desperately requires it.
But I want to remind you, the listener, of something absolutely critical as we wrap up. The transformative power we have been discussing for the last hour does not reside in this deep dive.
No, it doesn't reside in my voice or your analysis. It didn't even reside exclusively in Louise Hay's books or her legendary seminars.
The power is, quite literally, within you. You are the sole administrator of your own operating system. You are the only one holding the microphone to the tape recorder.
You possess the unalienable right and the practical ability to rewrite the code at any given moment.
Exactly. The point of power is always now. So before we part ways, I want to leave you with a final, perhaps slightly provocative thought to mull over in the quiet moments of your day. We spent a significant amount of time exploring the destructive nature of resentment and the liberating mechanics of forgiveness.
The heavy stuff.
I want you to think about the specific person or the specific situation that you are most furiously angry about right now in your life. The wound that feels the most raw. The ultimate injustice that you swear you will never forgive.
The grievance that you feel completely, 100% morally and logically justified in holding on too tightly.
Yes, that exact one. Hold in your mind. What if that specific fiery anger, that exact grievance you are clutching like a shield, is actually the only lock keeping you separated from your next level of physical health, profound happiness, or genuine success?
What if you were sitting in a dark prison cell of your own making, holding the key to the door tightly in your own hand, but you are stubbornly refusing to use it simply to prove a point to the person standing outside the bars?
And what if, in the grand scheme of your life, you are the only person who can ever turn that key? Think about that. Take your time wrestling with it. It's heavy, but it's the work that matters. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep and complex journey today. Be kind to yourselves as you process all of this. And please, do yourself a favor. Find a moment to look in the mirror today, look yourself right in the eye, and say something genuinely nice. You deserve it.